This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning everyone. Shalom Aleichem, Bruchim Aboim. Thank you everyone for joining this holy Nesiah to places of historical importance and significance in Sarfas in France. I hope everybody had an enjoyable trip so far. You know, it's always better to arrive without any luggage. It makes things much more convenient not to have anything to carry around. Who needs luggage? Things are very overrated. Who needs things? So as long as you're here, that's all that counts. As Hillel would say when he came to the Simchas Beis HaShoeva, Im ani kan hakol kan. If you're here, that's all we need. So first we want to give a big yasher koyach to Rabbi Roikeach, who put in many sleepless nights and countless hours of preparing for this trip. We've been discussing this for many months. Yasher koyach Rabbi, and thank you very much. I'm sure we'll all have a terrific time. I want to welcome a very special participant. It's a big cover that we have my father with us. Thank you very much. And my father has been prepping me for this trip for all the different drushas and material. So whatever I give over, I'm sure my father can give you in even greater detail. Okay, so let's begin by getting a little bit of a historical context for the individual that we're going to now. We're going to the kever of David Sinsheim, and I'm going to try to give you most of the information now because we're a little bit short on time. And at the kever we'll just talk about the tzidkus and the chachma of David Sinsheim. But now let's just try to get some of the historical background of this individual, Rabbi Yosef David Sinsheim, 1745 to 1813. You know, when you speak about European life at the beginning of the 19th century, the central character of importance is Napoleon Bonaparte. Not only did he inflict war upon all the neighboring European countries, but Napoleon had a major impact on European Jewish life. His remarkable rise and fall. What? Closer? His remarkable rise and fall contributed mightily to the dismantling of traditional Jewish values in the beginning of the 19th century. So Napoleon was a feared and famed general since 1795, and in 1799, at the age of 30, Napoleon became the consul of France, and he immediately began embarking on building his empire. Yeah, I have to put it all the way, okay. So, wherever his sword advanced, the ghetto walls were turned down, Jews were given positions of importance, new liberties for the first time in many hundreds of years, and most Jews held Napoleon in great esteem, and they considered him a benevolent ruler. And Napoleon's rise to power coincided with the rise of Reform Judaism. So in the early 19th century, much of French Jewry was drunk with newfound civil rights, liberty. They cast away religious traditions. You have to understand that France in the Middle Ages was the center of Torah scholarship because there were hundreds and hundreds of Balei HaTosfos. And as opposed to in Spain, where you had mass conversions, hundreds of thousands of conversions, it was somewhat of a rarity in France because of the incredible scholarship that existed here. So, in the beginning of the 19th century, many Jews joined Reform, and eventually they tried to assimilate completely into French society, and Napoleon's liberal attitudes proved to be a major factor in the process of assimilation. Now, it's interesting that while the Jews embraced Napoleon and their new civil rights, much of the Gentile world still had a violent and hateful attitude toward the Jewish people, because what Napoleon did was not able to cancel centuries and centuries of religious anti-Semitism and oppression. However, civil rights were granted to the Jews of Prussia in 1812. So Napoleon had a tremendous influence not only on French Jewry, but on Jews across the European continent. Considerable freedom was granted to the Jews of England. and Napoleon's brilliant military victories in Europe from 1799 to 1810 seemed to have European Jewry poised at the age of a new horizon of economic advancements and social acceptance. However, the Jews soon realized that they needed to view Napoleon with a healthy dose of skepticism. Napoleon was proving to be quite an enigma to the Jewish people. On the one hand, in May in 1806, Napoleon convened an assembly of notables to determine the best way to open up the economy to the Jewish people so that they could earn respectable livelihoods. But on the other hand, in April 30th of that very same year, 1806, Napoleon stated that the Jews were dangerous and they cannot be allowed to live on the border region, the province of Alsace, and the Jewish people were sort of scratching their heads to try to understand what was Napoleon's attitude toward them. However, the mystery of Napoleon, his outward tolerance toward the Jews, was actually based upon his grand plan of what he considered a benign solution to the Jewish problem. Napoleon's plan was to have the Jewish people disappear on their own. So incredibly, in 1806, in May, Napoleon convened an assembly of Jewish notables. And in February 1807, Napoleon established, you ready for this? A Jewish Sanhedrin for the first time in 2,000 years. The assembly of Jewish notables included 111 leading Jews from France, Germany, and Italy. The purpose of the assembly was to provide satisfactory answers to 12 pressing Jewish questions. I'll give you a few examples of some of these questions. So, number one, can a Jew have more than one wife? That was Napoleon's shaila. Question number three, are Jews prohibited from intermarrying with Christians? Question number five, what line of conduct does Jewish law prescribe toward non-Jewish Frenchmen? And finally, my all-time favorite question, the question that really has no answer. Who elects rabbis? That's something that great scholars are still trying to figure out. Who elects rabbis? The answers to these questions were submitted to Napoleon, who convened a mock Sanhedrin to ratify the answers and give these answers ratified legal standing. Now, Napoleon figured if the Sanhedrin themselves would say assimilation is permitted or that Jews cannot have more than one wife, this would be acceptable to Judaism at large. So Reform Jewry welcomed the program, and traditional Jews saw the Sanhedrin as a bad joke at best. Now, I'm going to digress a little bit because this is a really remarkable episode in history. In 1799, Napoleon set out to conquer Palestine. Anybody know who ruled Palestine in 1799? The Ottoman Empire, the Turks, and the Sephardim were living in Eretz Israel. The Sephardim always had a sense of loyalty to the rulers of the countries they lived in, and the Sephardim were never enamored with Western culture. And the leader in Jerusalem at the time was Rabbi al-Ghazi. And Rabbi al-Ghazi offered official prayers on behalf of the Turks and for the downfall of Napoleon. When Napoleon approached Jerusalem and he saw the forbidding walls of the great city, he turned around, he went to the seacoast, he captured the city of Jaffa, he massacred 4,000 defenders, and then he turned north, moving up the seacoast. Okay, now this is one of the most interesting little stories in Jewish history. It's Shabbos Parsha Zachar, 1799. Napoleon began the siege of Acre. The legendary Rav Nachman of Breslov happened to be in the city at the time. Why Rav Nachman was there? How he got there from the Ukraine. He went on one of our tour buses or something like that. How Rav Nachman got from Uman to Palestine in 1799 is a big question. And Rav Nachman of Breslov was in the city that Napoleon was going to set siege to. Rav Nachman cursed Napoleon, and that was the beginning of the end of Napoleon's empire. He could not prevail on Acre. He withdrew from the Middle East, and what's very interesting is that there was a big machlokes among the Rebbes about how to view Napoleon. The Chayz of Lublin was not sure, was skeptical about Napoleon. Rav Menachem Mendel Merimanov, he held Napoleon could be a great savior. He held if Napoleon attacks the Tsar of Russia, it will be Milchemes Gog uMagog, and Napoleon will usher in the Mashiach. So you're asking me, could I send you a picture of Napoleon? Yeah, all right, no problem. We're going to send down pictures of Napoleon. Everything that I need is in my suitcase except for a picture of Napoleon. So here we go. I might as well give that to you. Here we have a picture of Napoleon Bonaparte. We have the coin of Napoleon and the great Sanhedrin. And on the other side of the coin is Napoleon coming down from Har Sinai with the Shnei Luchos Habris, giving the Torah to Moshe Rabbeinu. Maybe you missed that when you were in yeshiva. You missed that part, that parsha. But Napoleon, yes, Napoleon considered himself a messianic figure, a religious figure, and Napoleon said if he was a Jew like Solomon, he would have built the temple. However, it is well known that the Baal HaTanya was very afraid of Napoleon. Even though the Baal HaTanya lived in a brutal Tsarist regime, and the Jewish people were oppressed in Russia, but the Rav Shneir Zalman of Liadi said if Napoleon comes and conquers Russia, and the Jews have civil rights and they have liberties, then it will remove their hearts from Avinu Shabbat And Rav Shneir Zalman of Liadi also prayed for the downfall of Napoleon. So we're going to come back now to Napoleon's Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin had 71 members. They were all appointed, at least indirectly, by Napoleon. 25 members were laymen. The remaining 46 were rabbis. Many of the rabbis were Reform rabbis from Amsterdam, Hamburg, Italy. They were all members of the Sanhedrin. And in an illustration of great Hashgacha Pratis, the head of the Sanhedrin was a great rabbi, renowned Talmudic scholar, Rabbi Yosef David Zinsheim, the Rav of Strasbourg, the author of the Yad David, the author of the Minchas Ani, and Rav David Zinsheim found himself as the Rosh of this ill-advised and strangely constituted Sanhedrin. And with great skill and diplomacy, patience, wisdom, he was successful in diluting any of the halachic effects that this Sanhedrin would have. He was able to limit the participation of Reform representatives, and eventually this Sanhedrin approved 9 articles of Jewish dogma and submitted them in the final report to Napoleon. So let me give you an example of a few of these psakim of the Sanhedrin of Napoleon. Number 1, polygamy is prohibited because of the Cherem de Rabbeinu Gershon. Any Jew who marries Al Das Moshe Yisrael first has to give a civil contract. Jews were bound to view their non-Jewish brethren as equals and aid and protect them just like they would Jews. And finally, Jews were not allowed to extract usury from Jew or non-Jew. April 6th, 1807, the charade ended. Napoleon dissolved the Sanhedrin. He dissolved the Assembly of Jewish Notables, and this ended one of the most intriguing episodes in Jewish history. One would think that this Rav David Zinsheim perhaps was viewed as some kind of modern rabbi, quite contraire. Rav David Zinsheim was held in the greatest esteem by none other than the Chassam Sofer, who gave a eulogy for Rav David Sinsheim is published in the Torah Moshe, and the Noid Vida himself quotes from Rav David Sinsheim. We'll hear a little bit more about him when we get to the kever. Enjoy the rest of your ride, and looking forward to the rest of the trip. Thank you very much.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.